So what stirs in you when you hear that song? What are the feelings? What are the emotions? We are on a journey, friends. And that stirring is that God awakening in you. There's a Sufi saying that God sleeps in the rocks, dreams in the plants, moves about in the animals, but awakens in man. And that stirring and that heart expanding is your awakening and your journey. And we're all on a journey. We're all on a journey, and our job is to be awake and be experiencing this journey that we're living. You know, you can go on a trip. Let's say you have your itinerary and you start in Kansas City, and then you're going to go to Paris and London and Amsterdam and Brussels and Venice, and then you're coming back to Kansas City. And you look at your itinerary and you say, well, my final destination is Kansas City. Why should I go? I'm here in Kansas City. The whole point is that we're experiencing this life. We're experiencing our journey. And I'm going to use as a symbolic method this morning to talk about your journey as a road. You know, a road takes you from one place to another place. One level of consciousness to another level of consciousness. One level of awareness to another level of awareness. And whether you want to call it the road less traveled, or the road to recovery, or take me home country road, whatever it is, it's a journey that you're on. And so I'm going to use an acronym for road today, ROAD, R-O-A-D. And the R is for realization. And unity is a place where we start to realize that we are more than this bone and blood and flesh experience, that we're spirit in a human form. And realization is something that is always happening to us, but something that we tend to want to avoid. And so realization comes from a place of listening. You know, and life gives you this little tap on the shoulder and sometime a whisper in the ear. And if we keep ignoring it, what happens? Pretty soon we get a 2x4 over our head. And that, unfortunately, is some of the way that we get our realizations. I know many of them have happened for me like that. And 26 years ago, something happened to me that I shared when I first spoke here at Unity Temple. And I was on my road, well, I was sort of on my road of my life. I was really sort of veering off the road of my life 26 years ago, and I was arrested for drinking and driving. And I ended up in a jail cell, having time to contemplate what was going on in my life. And I had a realization that I was dealing with the disease of alcoholism. Now, I had many opportunities to see that before, but I wasn't understanding what realization was. And so I ended up having a 2x4 over my head and being in jail, sitting there thinking, maybe this has something to do with me. And maybe there's something going on in my life that I'm not paying attention to. This song was sung in the movie The Sound of Music to a young lady named Maria that was also feeling contained and trapped as I felt in that jail cell. She had had the experience of getting into a convent to be a nun. But during this movie, and which was a true story, during her life, she fell in love with a man and with the whole family, which doesn't work so well if you want to be a nun. And so Mother Superior was telling her, this convent, Maria, is not a place to hide out from your problems. That you need to go out and live your life, confront your problems, and live the life you were born to live. So Maria and I both had realizations in these places that felt like walls and being contained. And we both had to kick our habits. It's a stretch. Okay, we're stretching this morning. All right? So let me ask you, what is that hard truth that you may be afraid to embrace? How is life trying to get your attention? Are you having a little tap on the shoulder or a whisper in the ear, or are you having a 2x4 over the head? What's a habit you want to kick? Because that's our opportunity on our road, is to realize the truth of who we are. And what's so interesting, friends, the minute you realize it, the minute you're willing to look at the lack and the fear and the worry and the control, it goes away, it shifts. The minute I was able to see that I was dealing with alcoholism, there was a whole community called Alcoholics Anonymous that was absolutely thrilled to love me until I could love myself, which was what was on the wall. And AA led me to unity. So with that realization, my life, my road became a place of opportunity and a place of a destination that I wanted to go. So we don't drive on our roads asleep. We drive on our roads realizing where we are. So realization is a huge part of your journey. And the next part, the O of the road, is ownership. Ownership. This whole unity movement started with Myrtle Fillmore owning the truth of who she is. I'm a child of God, and therefore I don't inherit sickness. Owning the truth of who we are as a spiritual being and speaking out into the world, declaring who you are. You know, this country has a declaration of independence. We're declaring who we are as a people. And how often do we declare who we are or talk about something we're not? In our prosperity class, which we're in a series here, and we have a class on Monday night, we're putting together a vision, and we're declaring what it is that not so much what you can do, but what it is you love. What is your ownership of your life? I have to tell the story about my dad. Janet and I did the talk last week, and I was talking about my father who 2 years ago went to Mexico to go hunting and ended up having a lung infection. And when he came back, there was really nothing to do, and he's lived 2 years with this lung infection, and he's been on oxygen, and he has a portable tank, and he's gone all around with it. He's really done a very good job with this situation. But about 2 weeks ago, he ended up being rushed to the emergency room because it's become worse. And while he was in the emergency room, he decided to own his life. And he said, I need to find out if I could be a candidate for a lung transplant. Now, the man is 80 years old. He's had a quadruple bypass. He was in the emergency room. But in his affirmation, I want to live, I want to own my life, he asked to be a candidate. He asked to see if he was a candidate. So they put him through all kinds of tests, and my mother was, there's no way he's going to be a candidate for a lung transplant. Come on, Clarence. But anyway, my father knew what he wanted. And after about 2 or 3 days of all these tests, they said, you're a candidate for a lung transplant. And my father called and said, told me he was a candidate for a lung transplant. And I said, well, Dad, I guess that's good news. It sounds kind of major, but anyway, he was all excited about it. So I talked about it on Sunday here. Sunday afternoon, I got a call because my phone was off Sunday afternoon, and he said, Heidi, they found a lung. I'm going in for my transplant. Like he was going in for a cup of coffee or something. He was just so excited about something that he'd owned and affirmed for himself. Now, everyone could have told him this was a long shot. His wife was telling him it's a long shot. But my dad knew that he wanted to live, and he wanted to own the possibility of being a candidate for a lung transplant. And he has, and I would like to say that there's nothing in my father that's not within any of us, well, except for a new lung. But meaning that inspiration and that ownership is what he knew that he needed to ask for. If there's anything that I wish children would have, would be a class on learning to ask for what you need. Ask for what you want. Ask for what that inspiration that is inside of you. And he's doing fine. In fact, I called him 2 days ago and I said, I'm going to call you tomorrow. And he said, well, you could try, but I'm out walking the floor, so I may not be here. I'm like, okay, whatever. So anyway, he's doing great. And it's been such a teaching for me about this asking for what you want and owning your life. When they ask you on the applications, do you own or do you rent? And I see that my father wanted to own a new lung rather than rent any more oxygen tanks. So here we go. We want to own the truth of who we are. And if you have a vision, you have an inspiration, whatever comes up for you and you hear that song, for me, that song just expands my heart. And whatever that is, own it, talk about it, affirm it, and watch how it comes into manifestation. And the A on our road of our life, our journey, is attention. Where are you putting your attention? I have been in my life and on a daily basis, I have to get my attention back on the truth, on the things that are real in my life, and rather than something that I've become accustomed to worrying about, fretting about, trying to control. And it is an exercise on a daily basis because we can get into the ain't it awful club, right? And then we find friends that ain't it awful. And let's talk about how bad the economy is. And let's talk about how bad health is. And let's talk about how bad whatever is. And then we start building up that energy. And it feels awful. So we need to exercise this getting back and putting our attention where it really belongs. There was a guy that was really in the Ain't It Awful Club, and when you're around people like that, and it could be you, they're just not much fun to be around. And this guy was a salesman, and he had two friends that were a Hindu and a Jewish person. And they were out on a sales call, and they were traveling together, and they'd been together about a week. And these other two guys were really getting sick of the curmudgeon, and their sales trip was almost finished, and they were heading to the airport. And their car broke down. And of course, the curmudgeon fellow was saying, I tell you, this always happens to me. Life always is difficult. My car always breaks down. I'm not surprised at all. And the two were like, oh gosh, I can't wait for this week to be over. So they look over and there's a farmhouse, and they go to the farmhouse, and the farmer says, we have a mechanic in the town, but he can't see you till tomorrow morning. And so, but you all are welcome to stay here. I have a room with 2 beds, and then there's a place to sleep out in the barn. And the curmudgeon, well, I'm not sleeping out in that barn. And so the Hindu fellow said, well, fine, I'll sleep out there. So they all bed down, and the Hindu fellow pretty soon there's a knock at the door, and it's the Hindu guy, and he says, there are cows out in the barn, and cows are sacred to me, and I can't sleep out there with the cows. And so the Jewish person said, okay, fine, I'll go out there. So the Jewish fellow goes out there, and pretty soon they all bed down. 30 minutes later, another knock at the door, and the Jewish fellow says, in my faith, pigs are unclean, and I can't be around pigs, and there's pigs in the barn. And so the curmudgeon, he said, you know what, I wasn't getting any sleep anyway. I'll go out there. I'm sure I'm not going to sleep all night. So he goes out. Everybody beds down again. 30 minutes later, there's a knock at the door. It's the cow and the pig. Where's our attention? Right? How are we talking? And can we become aware of what's coming out of our mouth? Because whatever we're affirming is what we're going to create. Are you on a road that feels like it's the road you want to be on, and you're paying attention to the things that are the beauty and the sights, or are you paying attention to these things that aren't alive for you?